All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the She is Hope LA She Is season's finale, our spring session season finale with the fabulous, the amazing Christine McKay of Venn Negotiation. You've probably read her background, but I'm just gonna read a little bit and I'm gonna let her introduce the rest of what she's gonna be talking about. But she's gonna discuss negotiate anything without fear, which I think is something that we could all use. Real estate, nonprofit, single moms, for those that wanna it's an amazing topic for everyone. But she's a global negotiation strategist and founder and CEO of Venn Negotiation. She has an MBA from Harvard University. That story, I don't know if you're going to get into it. It's truly amazing. And BS from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. So we share that East Coast vibe. She's worked in more than 50 countries across the globe, speaking on negotiation related topics. She's a rock star, super amazing woman. I love you. She's part of our board. Thank you for doing this, Christine. Take it away.
I love you too, Tisha. I'm so honored to be here. Single moms are you guys are my people. I was one at one point in time. And so I feel your pain and your joys and your triumphs and your tribulations. So Tisha and I have had just a ton of conversations, and the overlap in some of our story is pretty dramatic. So I'll just give you a hint, a little bit of my background and how I got to Harvard. I start, and then I'll go into kind of what we're going to talk about. So I essentially I was 19 and I got pregnant, and I just lost my job, and I got evicted from my trailer that I lived in, my manufactured home. And, I ended up living in the back of my car, and I was there until I was about 6 months pregnant. And I met a guy who I thought was going to rescue me. So I didn't believe that I could make good decisions for myself. So I abdicated my decision-making authority to him, and he was more than happy to take it. But he had all sorts of rules, like I couldn't work and I couldn't, have friends and all that kind of stuff. And when I decided, I had 2 more kids. I had 3 kids at 22. And when I decided I wanted that responsibility back, he said no. And I did it. I took it anyway. And ultimately, I went to community college, where I got a scholarship from there to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I did meet and marry the man of my dreams. We celebrate our 29th wedding anniversary in a few weeks. And I was able to make my way to work my ass off to get to Harvard University. And all of my kids walked across stage in front of me. They got little teddy bears that said HBS on it before I got my MBA from Harvard. So I have been a career negotiator. I've been a career advisor. I was a career advisor at Harvard for 7 years. I worked with over 1,000 Harvard MBA students and hundreds of alums and executives. I have been doing negotiation for 30 years, almost, 29 years, same amount of time as I've been married to my husband, Keith. And my 3 daughters are now 34, 35, and 36. And so my oldest will be 37 in September. And so it's been kind of a crazy journey. And that journey is really where I learned how to do the most important part of negotiation, which is the asking part. But let's talk a little bit. Who is working for somebody else? If you could just raise your hand. If you're off camera, just throw up a reaction. Who's working for somebody else? Who's working for themselves? Who's looking for a job? And okay, awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk in general about negotiation. Now, you hear a lot of people say, we negotiate everything. I kind of am not of that group. We have different types of conversations that we have. And in some of those conversations, we actually negotiate. And in others, we just have difficult conversations. And it's about a different type of understanding, especially when we're talking about kids and things like that. When you start talking about divorce and exes, there's a negotiation that happens in those situations, especially if lawyers are involved. And I'll tell you a story about a divorce that I actually I advised on last year. It was, other than my own divorce, which is a terrible proxy for what to do effectively. This one was, they didn't have kids involved and they were much older, but it's still, it's a story of how things could be done. But most of my experience is in business negotiation. And I want to give you some things tonight that you guys can take and apply into your everyday life, whether you're negotiating with your ex, whether you're negotiating with for a job where you're looking for a job, or whether you're in a business situation and maybe you're selling real estate, maybe you are negotiating with a customer or a supplier, or take your pick of what you might be negotiating. So one of the first things is I want to make a delineation between what's really negotiation and what we have come, especially in the United States, to define as negotiation. We confuse haggling with negotiating all the time. So when we think about buying a car, that's a haggle. The way that most Americans approach buying a car is haggling. You have one thing that you really care about, maybe two. You care about the model that you're getting and you care about the price. Those are the two things that we generally go after. And some real estate is a haggle because a lot of real estate agents approach the process as a haggle. You've got a house and you're haggling over the price, and everything else is kind of way out here in the middle of no man's land. And in competitive markets, you can't do that as effectively. But like at the little bank that is being turned into a house in Volin, South Dakota, which I have fallen in love with, and is an $87,000 little bank in a town of 161 people, you got a lot of leverage there. There's not a lot you're negotiating. You're negotiating over the price because it's in crappy condition. It's in crappy condition, and you're negotiating for the price. So you tend to be haggling. So when there's one thing that you're kind of fighting for, that's generally a haggle. If you have teenagers and they want the keys to the car, that's usually a haggle. That's how we have been trained to approach it, right? It's like, well, what are you going to give me if I give you the keys? You go take out the garbage. And we come up with a thing that we'll exchange for whatever it is that haggle component is. But in my experience, there are very few situations where haggling actually yields the greatest amount of value for everybody involved. Negotiation is really when we think about how can we do something that gives us more value. Now, I don't know, some of you, I don't know who's read my book, if anyone has, and I don't know who's seen me speak before. So for some of you, this may be a repeat kind of analogy, but I like to describe negotiation as an egg. So, and I don't know if you can really see this very well because of my green screen, but if I pull an egg out of my refrigerator, I have three people who want this egg. One person wants to make an omelet, one person wants to make mayonnaise, and one person wants to make a piece of art out of this egg, right? So three people want this egg. So how do we typically think about dividing an egg? What are the common things that we think of doing to an egg? You can come off mute. Boil it. So you boil it, right? So you boil it, you peel it, and you divide it, right? And so that's if you had three people who wanted this egg, you could boil it, you'd peel it, discard the shell, and then divide it. You could do what else with it?
You could break it and then measure it with like a teaspoon or something.
Right? Yep, you could do that. You could do that. Absolutely.
Scramble it, split it.
You could scramble it and split it. So crack it open, scramble it, split it. But you could also crack it open and you could, well, actually, you don't even need to crack it open. You can take a pin and you can poke a hole in the top and poke a hole in the bottom, and you can blow on it, and out comes the yolk and the white. And you can separate the yolk and the white, and then you can make, and this may not show up, you can make a Ukrainian Easter egg out of it. So if you think about an egg, right, this is the most commonly used food in the world. And we all do the same things with this egg. But I just showed you a way of creating more value out of this one egg than you thought was possible. And that's what negotiation is. How do you create more value than you thought was possible? So there are three, I'm going to tell you, there are three big components to every negotiation. So, and when I'm talking negotiation, I'm not talking about a haggle. I'm talking about how do we create more value? Now, in my book, Why Not Ask? A Conversation About Getting More, I tell the story of how I bought 2 brand new cars for the price of one plus $5,000. Now, that's an ordinary thing. When we go to buy a car, everyone's like, I hate buying a car, or, oh my God, I love buying a car. And the people who say, I love buying a car, it's because they like they like to think that they're getting one over on the sales, on the dealer or the salesperson, right? It's a competitive thing for them. But because we're taught to buy a car by going, this price and model kind of concept, what we did is I said, well, how does a car dealer make money? So the first step of any negotiation is to assess. You have to assess. And there are 3 things that you need to assess. You need to assess you, them, and it. And it is the specifics of what you're negotiating. So we'll get to that in a second. So the first thing is, what do you want? Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, like when we're talking about jobs, they'll say, well, I want to get a higher salary. Is that really what you want? What do you want to use a higher salary for? Right. So an example that I sometimes like to use is I love to ride motorcycles. Love riding motorcycles. So people will say to me, what do you love about riding motorcycles? I love the freedom that riding a motorcycle makes me feel. I'd say that I'd like the wind in my hair, but my hair is short and I wear a full face helmet, so that doesn't qualify. So I love the freedom of getting on a bike and just going. And I like that it's a little rebellious, that there aren't many chicks that ride bikes. I kind of like that. But I ride a BMW bike. It's a classy bike. It's really sleek. It's got, there's some status with that as a bike, right? So if somebody says, well, tell me, what does freedom mean to you when you're riding a bike? What does it mean to be free on a bike? It means I can go anywhere. I can go faster than I would normally go in a car. I can enjoy feel like I'm at one with the road. My husband and I ride together, and we have Bluetooth headsets, and we can be together and have a great conversation, or we can shut each other off and pay attention to what's around us. So there's all these wonderful things about freedom that come to mind that I really want, right? Then it's all right. When else have you felt freedom? Right? When else have you felt freedom? And you come up with I could come up with a list of things that when I felt free. When have I taken that a step too far? And when has freedom actually cost me something? When did I push a boundary that I learned a lesson that I shouldn't probably have pushed that boundary, or that's not an effective boundary for me to push, right? So when I say, what do you want? I don't mean to just say, I want a job, or I want a motorcycle, or I want this visitation. Dig deeper on that. Understand the reasons for asking for what you want, right? Understand at a deeper level. Because when you understand what you want at a deeper level, absolutely nothing will waver. You will not waver from it. You will not waver from it. If you're presented with an option that is inconsistent with what you are specifically trying to accomplish, you will move on. Now, it's harder to do when you're talking about dealing with an ex-spouse and co-parenting situations, and you have different requirements, you have different philosophies on child rearing, which that's true even if you're married, right? So those things just get exacerbated when you're no longer living in the same house. And God forbid that either one of you enter into new relationships where now you've got two other individuals who have two different perspectives on negotiating or on parenting. But that's the great part of approaching those kind of situations as a negotiation. Because if you're very clear on what you want and what your objectives are and what you're trying to accomplish, right? It's not just about, I want this. It's what are you trying to accomplish with that, which is usually far greater than the, I want this, right? I want more money isn't actually, I want more money. I was talking to a business owner right at the beginning of the Great Resignation, and she was like, I spoke at a women's event in Santa Barbara, and one of the women was looking for a job, and one of the women was, how do I tell an employee I'm not paying them more money? And I said, well, ask them what they really want. Most of the time, it's not more money. Most of the time, it's more freedom. And how do they define that, right? So when you're thinking about you and your relationships, when you're thinking about you and your job, what specifically do you want? Assess yourself and get serious about it. Don't just ask external opinions to validate what you're thinking. Don't just get in your own head, because this thing that's in here will lie to you so much. It will lie to you. It will tell you you are a piece of garbage, that you are not worth it. And it will tell you all the reasons why you should not ask for anything that you want, or why you should assume that the person's not going to give it to you. And the reality is all that this brain is trying to do is just keep you safe. And it knows that you are breathing oxygen right now and your heart is beating. And that's all it cares about. That's literally all it cares about. It's this reptilian brain that just keeps us right where we're at in complete safety. So if you, as you're assessing you and what it is that you really want, make sure you're thinking about how emotion is coming into play, because negotiating is a very emotional activity. And I'm going to say something that I've had people like get into all out battles with me, and I'm totally okay with it. You cannot manage or control your emotions, so stop trying to do it. Your emotions are involuntary. They just happen. You literally just go, oh, fuck, I feel this. That doesn't feel good. I like that feeling, or I don't like that feeling, right? We cannot control our emotions, but we can control how we act on them, what we do with those emotions. I recently was in a negotiation a few months ago with a gentleman. We were on Zoom. I use the word gentleman loosely. I can say that here. You'll know why in just a moment. You'll use it loosely too in this case. So we're on Zoom, and we get to a point, we're at a little bit of a contention, and he makes a sexual comment, and then he says, why on earth would anyone hire a woman to negotiate? Everybody knows women can't negotiate. I felt some things. I felt a few things, right? So now in my normal phase, I might have, I'd feel, 20 years ago, I'd feel something and I'd act on it. I react to that feeling. I was feeling angry. I was feeling disrespected. I was feeling humiliated. I mean, the list was actually quite long out of 3 sentences of the emotion that he evoked in me. But I was able to say to myself, notice these emotions. Okay, I'm feeling this. Now, usually I behave in this fashion when I feel that way, but that will not serve me right now. What behavior do I want to do instead? And immediately, as soon as I'm analyzing the emotion, I'm no longer feeling the emotion. I'm in an evaluative state. And now I can choose. And so I said to him, do you mind if I ask you a question? Go ahead. What reaction were you hoping to achieve by making those statements? And then I just let it sit there, right? Because, nothing. I was like, well, clearly they're inflammatory statements. So you were hoping for a reaction. Just let me know what you were trying to accomplish, and I'll decide if I want to give that to you or not. Or we can assume that this was all a terrible mistake and a misunderstanding, and we can move on knowing that this will never happen again, right? So when you are doing the assess you piece, you have to be aware of your emotions. Did anyone watch? I can't believe I'm bringing this up, but did anyone watch any of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard hearing other than me? Okay, I absolutely did. And so your face contorts into expressions that you don't even realize. Your body moves in a way that you don't even know. Get familiar with what your body does. I was visiting my daughter in Guatemala a few months ago, and I went, that's really interesting. I'm walking slightly different on my left leg than I normally do. I mean, that level of awareness. And it's not like you need to be that aware all the time, but start training yourself to be aware of how you look, how your face changes. I'll literally say, oh, I just felt my face contort into my mother's expression. This is what that means for you, right? And so we all have things that we do that are normal expressions. Start to become conscious of them. And that's part of the assessing of you. Because once you get a counterpart, once you get them involved, they'll be looking at all this. And the more centered you are, the more you know about what you want, the more you understand the reasons for why you want it, and the more you understand how you are going to choose to behave in different situations, the less you can get pulled off center. The less you can get pulled off center. Especially when you're having agitated, or as I like to call them, spirited conversations with people who you have very emotional relationships with, right? So you have to assess you. Then you have to assess them, right? It's all awesome and wonderful for you to want what you want, but is it even in the realm of possibility that they can actually provide it? So when I decided that I was going to go to a dealership and try to buy 2 brand new cars for the price of one, if I had anyone around me that I had told that I was going to do this, most people would have said, you're out of your damn mind. There's no way that will ever happen. And I will tell you that as recently as March, I met a guy who owns a car dealership, and he told me that this story was plausible and doable today. So just so you know. So, but to do that, I had to understand them. I had to in that case, I had to research, how do they make money? What drives them? How do they sell? Who's their market? I had to understand this broader thing and figure out, how do I and the deal that I want to do fit into their business and their business model. And that's true if you're looking for a job. Because if you're an employee, you're just a service provider to a company. That's all you are. So does the service I provide in that company fit, right? And how do I add value to that company? What kind of deal can I create that adds value to them? How are they defining value, right? We've already assessed you. You figured out what value means to you, but negotiation is a two-way street. You have to figure out what value means to them, so that you can create a deal that works for both parties. So in your personal relationships, when you're dealing with, I know that I wish I had learned this when I was dealing with my ex. And that is, do not, just try this. Try this in one conversation with your ex. Catch yourself from saying, why not? Just stop using why when you're talking in a highly emotional situation. So, right, my hair is actually kind of tame for me right now, even though I just got it done. But my hair is usually like seriously awesome colors. And I've been doing my hair in really weird colors for 24 years. And so I have people all the time say to me, Christine, why do you dye your hair those colors? Right. So what does that then do for me? What do I, when somebody says, Christine, why do you dye your hair those colors? What do I have to do? Come off mute. We are a tiny group. We can do this off mute.
I would say it would put you on the
It's
defensive.
a
Would that
challenge, yeah.
Put you on the
Mhm.
defensive.
Yep. Puts me on the defensive.
Why are
Renee,
you
explain
different?
yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Now I'm defensive. I have to rationalize my behavior. I have to justify it. And I have to defend it. But what's also interesting about that, when did I dye my hair? Did I dye it now in the
30 years
moment?
ago. No.
No, it's also in the past. It's also in the past. So when you ask why, it takes somebody out of the present, which is when
Oh,
you're trying to
yeah.
solve a problem, and it puts them in the past where they can come up with all sorts of bullshit things, because now you've just given them permission. You've just given them permission to dredge up the past because you've put them there.
Wow.
So don't use why. Usually when we ask why, we're actually asking a what. We're actually saying, so when we say, why did you do that? We're usually saying, what are the reasons for doing that, right? We're asking somebody to give us a list. That's a different question, right? That's not, why did you do that? Then it's something it's less defensive. So avoid using why when you're talking to your counterparts, but you have to understand them. What's important to them, right? Like if my ex-husband sued me when I was at Harvard, he sued me for custody of my kids. And the court papers said the rigorous and demanding nature of Harvard Business School make it impossible for the mother to provide proper maternal care. And so, yes, I do have that memorized because I've been dealing with that, working through that resentment, working through it. But I mean, if I knew then what I know now, I would be more curious. I'd spend more time being curious about trying to figure out what specifically it was that he was looking for in that situation. And the same is true in a job, and the same is true if you're negotiating with a client or you're negotiating with anybody, right? It's what is the specific thing that they're trying to accomplish, and what you're looking for are clues that get you to a, oh man, that big thing that he said or they said hell no to. What specifically were they saying hell no to? And it's rarely the whole of something. It's usually a piece of something, right? And so
Money with exes.
What's that?
Usually money with exes. You probably didn't want to pay child support.
It can, but what does money represent to them, right? What does money represent to them, right? You know, for a lot of guys and women who I know who pay child support too, right? For a lot of them, it's they're paying for something they feel they have zero control over. So what their issue is a control issue, and they don't understand how the money they're contributing is being used, right? And most women, myself included, I'm speaking mostly of myself in this situation, I did a terrible job of keeping my ex-husband apprised of how his money was being used, where it was going to, and that's on me. That's my fault. That's my part in that. You know, no wonder he was pissed off about it, right? Because I'd be pissed off if I, was paying a certain amount of money and had no idea where it was going. Right. And so there's an element around that. What does the money represent? Because it's not usually just the money. It might be because if they feel they can't make ends meet, or they can't, live a lifestyle, et cetera, it could be the money. But even then, if they can't live a lifestyle, right? What's the lifestyle that they're trying to live, right? And how do you create an environment of cooperation to figure that out? And you use curiosity to get to that point. So you assess you assess them, and you assess it. What's the situation that you're negotiating, right? So we all have different situations that we're negotiating. If I was an abused wife and I was going to court right now, I'd have to rethink my strategy in terms of, in light of the Amber Heard case. I'd have to rethink my strategy. That's an it. What is an external situation in the environment that impacts your ability to get the deal done, right? In real estate, it's inventory shortage, right? People are paying, over, above asking, they're paying cash offers, but how long is that sustainable? Now, more and more stories are coming out about people buying lemons of houses. Legislation is going to catch up with that, right? You can't sell a lemon of a car, but you can sell a lemon of a house that somebody spent, $1.25 million on, right? That's not going to stay that way, right? So the industry will either clean itself up or government will come in and do it for them. And so what's the it of the situation? I know somebody who's a restaurateur who signed a 10-year lease on restaurant space in downtown Los Angeles 2 weeks before LA closed down. So not paying attention to the it. And there was no out clause. They went out of business and are up to their eyeballs in millions of dollars of debt, right? And the problem is that they weren't paying attention to the it. Lots of people were talking about the prospect of LA shutting down, and in their exuberance and their optimism, they weren't paying attention to those external factors. Every negotiation you do has you, them, and it, and you have to assess all three of them so that you can create a picture, and it's like creating a map of where you're trying to go, right? And definitely have hard goals out of a negotiation, but don't be so hard and rigorous in them that you're unwilling to see other ways to getting you to what you want, because seldom is there one path to getting to an outcome. There are usually many different paths to getting to the outcome. You might have to delay a gratification a little bit, but maybe not. Maybe you can accelerate getting what you want in exchange for something else that's more important to the other person. But part of the thing about the assess phase is that most people just don't do it, or they do a very crappy job of it. 70 to 80% of your time, 70 to 80% of the negotiation effort is in the assess phase. That's where almost all of it happens. That phase, your ability to do well in that phase, to be effective coming out of it, will make or break you in the next two phases. So are there any questions before I go into the next two phases? All right, is this informative? Is this helpful? Okay, so the second phase, so the first phase is the longest and has the most effort put into it. The second phase is the hardest. That's the ask phase, where you actually have to get out of your head, and you have to shut your reptilian brain down and go, shit, I got to get uncomfortable right now. And I got to ask for 2 cars for the price of 1, right? I got to ask for this, big salary increase. I got to ask for this, this give, or whatever the ask is, I have to ask, right? And I often say that the hardest part of any negotiation is right here. It's all right here. It's all that opening the mouth, because here's what happens, right? It's like, okay, I got this egg. Okay, 3 people want it. All right, I know exactly how to boil, scramble. I can make a souffle. Those are the things I know to do with an egg. So I don't really care. I know that if I ask to get a shell of an egg that's fully intact, nobody's going to know how to do that. So I'm just going to assume that I'm going to have to figure out how to glue the shell together after it's broken. And it's going to be really messy, and it's not going to be as pretty, and it's not going to be as much value. And all it took was a pin to put the hole in the egg, right? But we convince ourselves that the way that we've done it in the past is the only way that works. So we get into this thing where we try something and it doesn't work. And then we try something else and it doesn't work. And we try something else and oh my God, it worked that time. So guess what we do for every problem after that? We try the same thing. No matter whether it's the right thing or not, we've lost curiosity. So some of the things that are important about asking, and I'll put a link in the chat. I have a quiz on my website that you can learn what your primary negotiation style is. So there are 4 key negotiation styles. There's a champion, there's a maverick, there's an ambassador, and there's a benefactor. A champion goes into every negotiation fully armed, fully armored, and ready to go to battle. And their entire objective is to annihilate you. They want to clean. They just want to wipe you off the map. They will do stupid things in their negotiation if they think it will hurt you. Right. That is the champion. The maverick, and about 10% of people are champions. The maverick is what I call my checklist negotiators. So they kind of shoot and then they aim later and they go, oh crap, that thing I shot wasn't really what I meant to shoot. It's a terrible analogy right now, and I apologize because I apologize, and I just thought about that, and I feel bad about that. I'm a Montana girl. That's where that analogy comes from. But the thing is that and now I'm going to have to come up with a different name for Maverick. But essentially they go in with a checklist and they say, these are the 10 things that I want out of this negotiation, or the 5 things, or the 3 things, whatever that is. I have this list of things, and they negotiate for 1, 2, and 3, and they get them. And that feels good. But they don't get 4 and they're ticked off about it. And they get 5, 6, 7, 8. They don't get 9 and they're really pissed off about not getting 9. And they make a big stink out of it and they get 10. And so they walk away from the negotiation. They go, well, I guess I got 8 out of 10. So I got an 80% on the quiz. And okay, I guess that's okay. I guess I got a good deal. But the 2 things that they got that they didn't get actually were the only 2 things that added the most. Those were the 2 things that added the most value. But because they were going item by item by item and not looking for where there was synergy to combine things and integrate things, they lost the opportunity to increase value. They're the ones who are looking at the egg going, I'm going to crack it and I'm going to scramble it, or I'm going to boil it and I'm going to split it that way, right? That's a kind of the maverick structure of kind of thinking about things. The ambassador, they love negotiating. They love negotiating for the art of collaboration. They don't care so much about actually closing deals. They actually care about creating deals. They like finding value. They don't care about closing on the value sometimes, and which is one of their biggest challenges. And the benefactor, they think that they are like being super benevolent by saying yes to everything and giving in and all that. And then they walk away and they go, they treated me like a doormat and I don't get it. And then they get pissed off and they get passive aggressive and they undermine the relationship. And that's the benefactor. The benefactor is actually, according to research, the most difficult of all the negotiation styles. It's the least effective because we agree to things that we can't do just to get people to stop the process, because we're so conflict avoidant. And conflict negotiation isn't about conflict. It's about having a conversation. So my philosophy is that negotiation is a conversation about a relationship. And you can't win a relationship, but you can get more value out of it. And if it's not value for you, it's value for your constituents who are also part of the deal. So if it's with your ex, and you have kids, it's with your kids. Your kids are where the value gets realized, not necessarily fully with you. And so you need to know what your primary style is, and how you ask matters. And we talked a little bit about this. Avoid why questions. Try questions, what and how questions at the beginning of a conversation when you're trying to get something. If I say, what might we do about this situation? Let's say you're kind of like at this, and you take a step and you take a break, go to the balcony is what it's called in negotiation terminology, and take a breather and just let yourself calm down, and then come back at it and say, all right, we clearly have two different perspectives, and I want to respect your perspective, and I may not fully understand it. What might we be able to do to overcome this situation, right? Using language around how might we or what might we do actually opens the brain up for creating possibilities, versus what should we do, what could we do, tend to narrow possibilities. It makes the brain think more narrowly. So what might we do, right? How might we solve that? And you avoid keep your questions very open-ended, at least in the beginning, until you're trying to get an actual decision. Once you're trying to get a specific decision made, then you go to yes, no questions, where you get a declarative, right? And if somebody says no, what specifically are you saying no to? Now, one of the other mistakes that a lot of people make when they're negotiating is they're very general. And you can't negotiate something that's general. You cannot take action on something that's general. You have to be specific. And so if somebody responds to you in a general way, ask them to be more specific. What specifically are you looking for in this situation, right? When specifically do you want that by, right? So start using that language, because it allows you to cause somebody to come from this broad area into this more narrow area, where you can start to take action on this narrow thing. You can't take action on this general top of the funnel stuff. You can only take action at the bottom. So I want to say quick thing about emotions. So emotions are hugely important in negotiation. Do not discount how you feel about a situation. Your gut is smarter in a negotiation than your head is, because your head is doing all that bullshit talking to you, and your gut is really what's telling you what's right and true for you, right? So if you feel like I had a prospect call on Friday, which could be an incredibly lucrative deal for me for my company, if I were to take it. And the person who networked me into that deal, and I mean like probably a 7-figure deal for me. So, and the guy who networked me into it said, well, what do you think? And I said, I won't take them as a client. And he's like, well, why? And I said, there's some specific things that aren't sitting right in my stomach, there's just something that's not right. There's misalignment between the two owners, who are also a husband and wife team. She wants to sell, he doesn't, they're not communicating, they're not on the same page. It's going to be a sale from hell. I don't want to deal. I don't want to have to negotiate with them and a buyer at the same time. So it's like, you got to trust that. You got to, and so assume a lot of the times that you are in somewhat of a negotiating situation with varying different levels of parameter, and think about how you're feeling. And goes back to what we talked about before. Start to teach yourself not to react to the emotion, but start to recognize it, become aware of it, notice it, and then choose how you're going to act on it. So you've assessed you, them, and it, and now you've asked. And the last part of the negotiation is you have to take action. You have to act on what you've now talked about. So you've done all this talking, you've got agreements in principle, you've got ideas of what you're going to do, and now you're either going to do a handshake or you're going to actually draft a contract. So the handshake kind of deal is an informal contract, still legally binding, and you should still document the hell out of those in your emails and your notes, or a formal contract that an attorney drafts up. We're not going to go into it today, but I've developed kind of a very easy way of reading contracts that actually assesses risk for in business environments, that says, all right, this is where you have, and have a picture, can show somebody a picture of what their risk looks like in their contracts, so they know where to spend time. But one of the other things that I like to talk about when I talk about action is that I always talk about, lawyers laugh at me. Negotiation is a hopeful act. It's something we do today in this moment based on information from the past that we're using to divine a future that theoretically is better for us, either together or apart, right? Because negotiating a separation, that's theoretically a better future for both of us, whether we're, together or apart, however that works, right? And so you can only get to an agreement in the present, right? But you have to have this hope of the future. And so negotiation is a hopeful act. But as 2020, 2021, and in my case, 2022 has shown me that not everything that I think is going to happen today is actually going to happen. Shock. Right. So you have to be prepared to renegotiate your deals. And it's something that people don't talk about. There are different risk factors that come up in your relationship that may cause the need to renegotiate. And the thing that makes renegotiating different is that the deal may not be working for you, but your counterpart still thinks that it's working for them. And so you have to convince your counterpart that the deal is, while not bad for them today, is going to be bad for them in a very short period of time, and that we've got to right the ship or agree to separate, agree to part ways, however that looks. So you have to assess you, them, and it. You have to know your negotiation styles, whether you're a champion, a maverick, an ambassador, a benefactor. Start to try to pay attention to the use of why questions and start to eliminate them from your vocabulary, especially in really heated emotional conversations. Focus on what and how questions instead. And then take action, and then make sure you're constantly checking in or frequently checking in. Is this deal still working for us, for you and for me? Is it working for me? Is it working for you? And if it's not, what are we going to do about it? So that's negotiation in a nutshell. So what kind of questions can I answer for folks? Yes, Gay Ellen.
I teach at a lot of assisted living facilities. That's where my buckle is. And it's really usually a light negotiation. However, I've come across a client that in the beginning told me she's brand new. They don't have an executive director. Their business person isn't in the office for a while. She has no idea how my invoices will be paid just yet. And, but I should send them to her. I drafted up an agreement. I said an agreement needs to be signed. She said she would have to send it to corporate. I've gone twice. Both times, barely anybody came in to take the class, which means it hasn't been promoted. I have no intention of going back again. No, not going to happen. However, I have 2 outstanding invoices.
Yep.
I don't even care if the agreement gets signed because I'm not going back. So that's null and void. But I have 2 invoices that need to be paid.
Have you issued late charge, or have you sent them a past due notification?
No, because they're not past due.
Okay, so that's the first step. So whenever you're doing, and different states have different requirements, but most contracts will lay it out, what your payment policies are. And so if they're not past due yet, you don't have anything you can do yet. All you can do is
Not go back.
and send her and remind her that well, you have to be careful. Well, you're not under contract. So if you're not under contract, then
No,
yeah. So if
it's
you're
not a
under
contract kind of thing. In fact, basically the agreement was I show up and I get paid. That's, it's really easy. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult.
then
But-
I would state if you in the future, not with this client, but with somebody else, I would include language in your agreement, your standard agreement. This is, you get paid within 48 hours of delivering class. That way, then you're getting paid quickly or at the time of delivery, at the end of the class, right? So you're getting paid, you deliver the class, they have a check waiting for you, ready to go. You deliver the class and you get paid. And then then it's past due right away, right? And so I would, if I were in your situation, I I would try that going
Well,
forward, not with this client.
With most of my clients, basically they have me send them the invoice before I even work. And that is because the, from the date of it's sent in, it usually takes the accounting department and everything 3 weeks to process everything.
So you hit on something that I didn't talk about, but that is actually a huge component in the ask part of ask phase of negotiation. And that is, what is your process
Right.
for getting to a deal, regardless of what their process is, right? So you have your business, your situation, and this is how you want to get paid. You want to get paid in this manner, in, you know, this medium. You want it to come with a check, a Zelle, however you want it. What's the medium? At what point after, you know, do you want to get half before you deliver and the remainder after delivery? What's the time frame of that? What's the penalty for late payments? What qualifies as a late payment? And do they and when are they in breach of contract? And what recourse, how long do they have to fix it? And what recourse is there, right? That's kind of the flow that you want to have, so that you know, so that you're not like, so every client doesn't get to pay you whenever the hell they want to. You can't manage a business without knowing what that frequency is. You have to be able to plan that. And so I would suggest having a contract for all of your clients that lays out what you want, and then different parties will negotiate it, right? And that's fine, but at least you're putting forward your process and what you want out of the situation, and they'll let you know if they can do it or not.
And
That
Tisha,
takes
this is being recorded, so I'll be able to hear that again, right?
Yeah. So that'll take the guesswork out of it for you.
Right.
And it also elevates you as a professional, because to have thought through some of this stuff is not something that a lot of people have thought about. A lot of small business owners don't think about these things. So,
Okay.
Okay.
So my next question is, I'm supposed to go back there on the 19th of June. And I don't want to go back there. So I guess my next question is, what do I tell her?
well, I would not tell anyway, and I wouldn't tell. So I would show rather than tell. So, and I would use questions to get her to come to a decision on her own, right? Let her think that she's the one making, she sounds like she is in need of, she needs to know that she has power in situations and control in situations. So it's always best to leave these situations on a high road. And one way to do that is to say, so I noticed that we had X number of people at the last 2 sessions, and I'm wanting to get a better understanding of how you are evaluating whether the sessions I'm teaching are effective or ineffective. And if by your measures, is this effective or ineffective? And if it's ineffective, what should we do about it? Right. And, you know, one of those options is that you discontinue teaching the class. So you say, you know, one option is that she changes how she promotes, which she's not likely to do. You know, come up with a couple of, at least one, another option. And the third option is that we discontinue the program. Right. And you get, that gives her the feeling, that's the negotiation, versus just going in and being annoyed at her or upset at her and saying, I'm quitting. You're able to build, even if you don't continue to work with her and you don't really like her that much, her opinion of you will be very different by taking that approach, versus if you were to go in and just say, you haven't been promoting this, and this is a waste of my time, and you're not paying me when you need to pay me, and so I'm done, right? That creates a totally different image. That will leave a completely different view of you to her than if you do this other approach. Try it.
Yeah, I need to hear it again. Tisha, you'll send me that recording because I need to hear it again. Because I don't want to go back there on the 19th. I've got 2 invoices that haven't been paid. And I've got 1 person in each class.
And I think that if you approach it from an effectiveness discussion, that's
Right.
probably not effective for her either,
Right,
right? It's
Right.
probably not. So
right,
now
right.
you have a common ground to both part ways, but there's no animosity,
Right,
no visible animosity
right,
between the two. You'll walk away going to hell with that, but she doesn't have to know that.
right, right. Okay, thank you.
Yep. What else?
I'm curious what your negotiation style is, since we talked about the 4 different negotiation styles. So I'm curious what yours is.
I am an ambassador. But one of the things that I have really spent a lot of time working on is that, so that's my primary style. So I will default to that style. And that's where I'm most comfortable. It's a very collaborative style. It's a very, let's sit beside each other and solve the problem together kind of thing. But trust me, I can pull out my champion when I need to. And so that's one of the things that, as I've been negotiating over the years, that I've learned how to do. We actually all are incredibly, we all use these different styles. And what happens is the very best negotiators on the planet are 7 years old. And there's actually research out of Boston College that was just released last summer that they studied boys and girls aged, I think, 3 to 10, and they evaluated how they negotiated with adult men and women. And they, both boys and girls, negotiate equally with women throughout that whole period. But starting at the age of 8, girls stop negotiating with men. Now, they don't know why that is, but as early as 8, girls quit negotiating with the adult men in their lives. Now, one of the things, there's a huge physiological change and psychological change that happens from 7 to 8. And that is really around consequences and how we see consequences. So the beautiful thing about a 7-year-old, if you watch them when they're asking for something that they want, they'll go up to mom and they'll say, I want this. And mom says no. And so then they'll ask for mom maybe 2 or 3 more times, but they'll try to ask it in a different way because they're searching. They're super curious about, how do I do this in a way that gets me what I want? And mom's still saying no. So now I'm going to go ask dad. Right. But I know from my past that if I ask dad the same way I asked mom, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get what I want. So I'm going to ask dad in a slightly different way. And if he says no, then I'm going to ask grandma and grandpa, right? Or I'm going to ask, the teacher, or, right. And 7-year-olds are really good at seeing how different people react to their questions and what gets them the most yeses. The problem is that as adults, we tend to surround ourselves with people that are fairly similar to ourselves. And as a result, the people that we're surrounded by often have similar negotiation styles to us. So the way that kid asks and gets yeses amongst his or her family unit, right? That's where they get their yeses. They're going to start using that style more as their default, and they'll use the other styles less frequently because it doesn't yield the results and the outcome that they're looking for. And then what happens is, because nobody talks about this stuff ever again, and nobody teaches negotiation skills or how to have hard conversation skills, they default to that same style. I had a conversation with a 78-year-old man who said to him that his wife of 54 years had finally lost it with him because he's an asshole. He's a champion who goes in, and if he isn't seated the second his reservation is for, he's that jackass that's screaming and yelling at the poor person, standing and seating people, right? And his wife is mortified, and she's, trying to crawl into the fibers of the carpet, but he had no idea all those years, and he had no clue, right? And that's very champion behavior because he's not very observant of what's around them. But the point is that like a 7-year-old, you're never gonna be that again, because we're all, a product of all of our experiences. And so our experiences have taught us many different things. And so we'll never be that level of curiosity ever again. But we can tap back into some of that curiosity, and we can start to play with things and try things. And I teach a couple of programs. I have a negotiation 101 class where we go a lot deeper into this stuff, and we do a practice case. And then I have a program called Venn Masters, which Tisha actually took some of that, where we do a lot of cases, and it's a lot of practice. And one of the exercises is actually encouraging people to practice it, to negotiate in a style that's not their own, not their default, so that you can start to see what it's like. Oh God, when I tap into that benefactor, right, which is really good if relationships are broken. A benefactor is good at kind of gluing it back together. Don't ask the benefactor to like keep it going, because they'll break it again by promising things they can't deliver. But at that front end, that benefactor is really good at kind of coming in and gluing that. So yeah, so I am an ambassador. Anyone else?
How did you get the car? You said you got the two car.
Yeah, so I did. I went in and I offered, I told them that I wanted to buy 2 cars for the price of one, and they quoted me list price times 2. And I told them that they could do better than that. And I had a little spreadsheet. I had assessed, we drive standard transmissions, which that's a what I want. That's part of what, that's just kind of part of the essence. So that gave us some leverage in the negotiation, because we were in New England and people don't drive manual transmissions. I think it was 7% of the population drove a manual transmission. And it was a car that was marketed toward people who were under 30 and didn't have kids. It was a Honda Element. You could, turn 21 and puke in it and hose the whole thing out. And it was great. Go camping, throw your dog in the back. But not great if you had, young kids or anything like that. And I estimated, I figured out there are fewer than 7% of that population that can drive a standard. And so it's a pretty small number of people who would buy the car. I intentionally looked for the dealer with the most standard transmission vehicles on their lot. And then I estimated what the cost of holding inventory was for them, what it meant in terms of slowing down their inventory turns, and what it would do if they were actually to have a higher turn product on the lot. And so I was wrong in my assumptions on the holding cost. And so I asked him what the number needed to be, and he said $5,000. So essentially I bought one car for list and bought the other one for $5,000. So. And literally car dealer guy said in March, oh yeah, that's totally doable. Totally doable. You could go do that today, he said, in this market, right? He said that. So, and then the divorce story, just so you guys know that it's possible. This elderly couple, they were, well, they're not that old in my opinion, but she's, I think, early 70s and he's late 70s. They'd been married for 23 years, but separated for over half of that, and had a big ranch in Santa Cruz. And they were finally wanting to sell that, and were going to have to figure out how to take the money out of escrow. And so it was her ranch before they got married, and she wanted to sell it. He refused, so she wasn't able to participate in the growth of the stock market, where she could have invested her money. So she had a huge opportunity loss as a result, because he wouldn't sell the ranch, and all of her money was tied up, whereas he had come into a multi-million-dollar inheritance. So he was flush with cash anyway. And she was struggling to figure out she was living in a yurt on the property. Let's just put it that way. And it started out with him saying, I'm taking 70% and she can have 30. And if she doesn't like it, she can sue me. 3.5 days later, I'm on the phone with him and he's like, she can have all of it. And I get on the phone with her. And so he had started out by, I did this and I did this and I invested here. And so all in the past. So everything was in the past. Right. And so then he's giving all of it to her. And she's now also in the past. Well, I did this and I did this, because she wanted to give him something, but she was kind of now leaning that she was going to keep 70 and I'll give him 30 kind of thing. And if she was even being that generous. And it was all, well, I did this and blah, 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 blah. And so I simply asked her, I said, Sharon, I said, what are you doing after we get off the phone today? And she said her partner is an executive in a well-known retail chain. And so he has a condo at St. Kitts, and that's where she was, hunkered down for the front end of the pandemic. And I said, so Sharon, what are you doing when we get off the phone? And she said, I'm going to the beach. I said, awesome. Is what Tom did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, last week, going to impact what you do at the beach today? No. Is what you did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago, yesterday, going to impact what you do at the beach today? No. In 10 years, when you are 83, 84 years old, and you look back at this moment in time, how do you want to look at this memory? How do you want to see yourself? When you think about that future, what do you want this person to be? So she gave him 50% of it back, plus $10,000 that she had borrowed from him to start her business. And they got to go their separate ways. They have grandkids together. They don't hate each other. They don't think that they wasted 20 some odd years of their lives. They don't have that deep, there's still some resentment there, but they don't have that deep, I hate you. They literally both said to me, I'm really fond of her, or I'm really fond of him, and I have good memories. And so for me, that was the proudest negotiation I ever did, because I helped them preserve those memories. It was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
Pretty cool. So
you're pretty cool. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want to ask? This was amazing.
Where do I find your book?
Book is on Amazon. I will put a link into, here is my website, and let me get the Amazon link. And I should have had this.
So I have a question. When I hit save
yeah,
chat,
if you just go to
save chat, where does it save it to?
it should save
Your
it to a folder in Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And you can
That's
always
the title of the book.
I can get you the info too if you can't get to it.
Yeah, my system is being weird, so
That's okay.
but there's you can take the quiz there. We're in the process of reworking it, but it'll give you an idea of kind of what your style is. In the quiz, we talk about modern and traditional communication styles as well, which essentially means you like to be, if you're modern, you like texts and you like short things, bullets, keep it short, sweet, to the point. You like 15-minute meetings, 10 or 15 minutes. If you are traditional, you tend to like longer meetings. You prefer email communication, and you're more about getting together in person and having a traditional kind of meeting. The Zoom thing is not your deal usually, if you're traditional, because the traditional is all about that. Like I kind of describe it as a house. It's like which Tisha will appreciate, right? A traditional house, like an old Victorian in New England with a fireplace, and maybe you've got a pool in the backyard, and all the family comes, and you've got the spot for Christmas trees that has been the spot for Christmas trees for 300 years, and you can just see, you can close your eyes and you can imagine all the families and the children that have come through, and the memories that sit in those four walls. You can just see that, right? And that traditional side of how you build that. And some people just really, really cherish that, versus the person who likes the steel and glass and the sleek lines and the modern technology and the the high-end security system and behind the rolling gates. And it's two very different styles. And it's important, because if you're meeting somebody for the first time, knowing which one somebody is. Like, I'm modern, so don't ask me for an hour-long meeting, because I'm not likely to take it. So as an example, but if you're traditional, I'm likely to invite you to an hour-long meeting first.
Cool.
So
Love it.
all right, so there's you can and here's my email, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And because it's She Is Hope LA, that is my phone number, so you can text me. Text me is better than emailing.
Yeah, but
For
you get
sure.
inundated. This was great. Thank you so much, Christine. You're
Thank you.
fabulous. Thank you
This was
all for
great. And
joining us.
Christine, Tisha, you should make sure that Christine's on our list for our speaker cafe.
I know, actually, I was
Cross-
emailing her about that. I
Cross
have an
the
email
state.
ready for her already.
We always like to bring amazing training for Women's Council, and I think you would be fabulous.
That's
Oh,
the-
awesome. I would love to do that. I
Yeah.
would love that.
I have an email I drafted as we were speaking going, she needs to come speak for us. Yeah, totally. And a couple other things I'm adding to it.
Well,
Christine,
you
we'll
ladies
talk
are
about.
amazing. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to support you, help you. Just reach out. You guys are all phenomenal. So
Likewise. Thank
and
you.
it's
so
an
much.
honor.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you at one of
Awesome,
our
Christine. Thank
conferences.
you.
See you at a
awesome.
conference.
so much.
Great
Very
night.
helpful.
You're awesome.
Yeah.
Have a
Start
great
this up
night.
again in
Good
August.
night.
All right. Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.